Leon here with At Home with Music. And now that you've come this far in the From Ears to Fingers series, then here's what you've learned so far. First of all, you've determined whether or not you are truly tone deaf. And I'd be willing to bet that you found out that you're not tone deaf. And then we talked about why you should study scales, the importance of learning scales when it comes to playing by ear. And then we went from scales to learning about intervals. Not only are melodies built using the notes of scales, but they are also built using intervals. And then from scales and intervals, we went on to chords. Remember, we're doing all of this without actually reading notes on paper. It's all being done by ear. And so you're training your ear to hear notes, to hear scales, to hear intervals, and now to hear chords. And then we went through some basic chord progressions that you should know. And if you listen for these basic chord progressions, you're going to find that they pop up all the time in popular songs. In fact, I would go so far as to say that some chord progressions have been overused. After that, it came time to play a song. And so you started out, first of all, by picking out the melody of a song that you wanted to play. And then we learned how to add chords to that melody. Then we talked very briefly about whether you were playing as a soloist or as an accompanist. So as you know, to play as a soloist, it's just you at the keyboard playing a song. Pretty simple. To be an accompanist means you are now playing for somebody. You're supporting another musician. Might be a singer, a guitarist, a saxophone player, whatever. You are now playing as an accompanist. And then we learned about chord substitutions. As you practiced adding chords to a melody, you learned that you could substitute one chord for another and have it still work. And so you learned the basic way of doing chord substitutions, just getting your foot in the door, as it were. And then I gave you a short introduction to the art of transposing, which is basically playing a piece of music in a different key, a skill that every musician should know. Let's go ahead and figure out how to do this. Now you might notice that the title of this video is We're Going to Nashville. And you might be thinking, what in the world does that have to do with transposing? Well, it has a lot to do with it actually, because we're going to explain the Nashville numbering system. Now before, you noticed that we gave Roman numeral names to the chords, and we're going to simplify that even further by just using basic numbers. The first thing we can do is assign numbers to each note of the scale. So I've shown you the notes for the C major scale, and we have assigned numbers to each of the notes. We assign the same numbers to each chord that we created on the notes of the scale. So we start on the first note of the scale. This is the C major scale, and the chord we build on C is C major. C is the root note. So we're going to label this chord number 1. And now here's how we will number our chords in the key of C major. So you'll notice we have C major, that's chord 1. D minor is chord 2, and we indicate that it's a minor chord by putting a minus sign after the 2. So 2 minus, if you like. E minor is the note, or rather the chord built on the third note of the scale. That's also a minor chord, so we call that 3 minus. And then we have F, which is 4, G, which is 5, A minor, which is another minor chord, so it's 6 with the minus sign. So we use a minus sign after the number to indicate a minor chord. You can also label seventh chords. For example, G7, we would simply call that 5-7. And D7, we'd call it 2-7. So by using the Nashville numbers, our chords and their qualities, you remember chord quality, major, minor, or seventh, the chords and their qualities are represented, and here's the key, without any particular key signature. In other words, the one chord in a different key is going to be essentially a different chord. So take a look at this big chart here. In the key of C, we've already gone through these, and you can see what the 1, the 2 minus, 3 minus, 4, 5, 6, and so on. But in the key of D flat, the one chord is now D flat. In the key of D, the one chord is D. And I think you can study this chart and figure out how it all works. You've got a whole bunch of chords there, a lot of them overlapping. Nonetheless, you can see the numbers for the various chords in every major key. Now, once you understand the Nashville numbering system, transposing is really quite simple. You can use a piece of sheet music to help you practice using the system. First of all, you take a look at the chords and you write the Nashville number, and you probably should do it in pencil, above each chord you see using your chord chart as a guide. And so here's the process. You translate all the chords in the song to Nashville numbers, and then translate all the numbers back into chords in the new key. So we're going to use a simple song as an example. Let's use the song Amazing Grace. Here is the original chord sequence in the key of C. Now let's say you want to play this song in the key of G major. Well, using the chord chart, we'll write out the appropriate Nashville number for each chord symbol. So you can see we've done that. Now we use the scale chart again to translate the numbers back into chords. And we'll use the G row of the chart and write the new chords below. Notice that the chord qualities remain the same. Now at first, you will have to do your transposing on paper. You can write out the changes on your music, and many professional keyboard players still do it this way. So there are an awful lot more concepts to cover in playing by ear, but this marks the end of this introduction. Later on, you can learn how to hear a song in a recording and learn it from that. We should also spend some time studying the circle of fifths. And there are things you can do to make your accompaniment patterns more fancy. And you can learn how to modulate from one key to another. We should also deal with minor keys. And so that will be in the series From Ears to Fingers, Part 2. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope this whole series has been helpful to you. I would encourage you, if you have the time, to go back and review from the very beginning of Music Basics. Go through those videos there. They're very short. Then you can come back here and go through this again. And I think you'll be ready for what we have coming up next.